You're listening to BQN. Assimilate the audio.
Engage.
78 years have passed since the days of the original USS Enterprise. Now a new Galaxy starship has been designed.
Hailing frequencies open. Welcome to Galaxy Class, a Star Trek The Next Generation podcast on BQN. I am your host, Ambassador Stephen, and joining me today is...
Antimatter specialist, Cortney.
Cortney, hello.
Hello.
I am so glad to have you here as our first officer exchange, as it were, on Galaxy Class.
Happy to be the first officer exchange. Very excited. That is a dream realized, to be honest.
Really? Tell me about that.
Yeah, I mean, I love Star Trek. Who doesn't love Star Trek? Well, I guess not everyone. But yeah, I love the show. I love the lore. I love the fandom. And so being able to talk about it with like a cool person such as yourself is a real win, you know?
So listeners, as we mentioned in our first episode, we'll occasionally have guest co-hosts. So either when Stefan or myself can't be here, or just because we found someone really cool. Cortney falls under both categories, but we're excited to have Cortney here to chat about a lesser discussed episode.
Yes, great themes, good episode, worth talking about.
Today we're going to get a little background on Cortney, who she is as a Star Trek fan. We're going to discuss the episode The Outcast, and then we'll share some fun facts, some trivia about the episode. Listeners, we met because of Star Trek. We used to work together a while back, and in our very first meeting, I noticed that Cortney was wearing Delta earrings, and I sat there during this lunch meeting and stared at her ears, asking myself, do I ask? Do I say something? Do I let it go? But I asked, it was confirmed, and then we went off on a Star Trek tangent, and our poor colleagues had to observe.
Right. Well, and if we can rewind, it was a little awkward. Stephen was staring at me, and I was like, this is strange. I am married. What is happening? And then he confirmed that it was, in fact, my earrings, which was a relief and a joy, because when you find a fan in the real world, you found a friend.
Absolutely. So let's dive in.
This is the captain. Senior officers will report to my ready room immediately.
So, Cortney, do you mind sharing with me your earliest TNG memory?
Okay, so I don't have like one memory. I feel like Trek has always been like a part of my like household growing up. My dad had this signed picture of George Takei like on our wall. And I like vaguely remember in the back of my mind him always telling this story of him being in an elevator with my mom and then George Takei just like being in that elevator with them and being really super nice. And, you know, just my dad always having all of the Star Trek movies on in the background. And then just, you know, as things would air on like UPN or whatever network was around when I was a child that no longer exists, we would just always watch it because everyone liked it. And there was just this established love for Star Trek in my household, I guess. And you know, something else that comes to mind is my cousin, before, you know, we had Netflix and Paramount Plus and all this stuff with all of our favorite shows streaming, she had every single episode of Next Gen recorded on VHS, just like a huge shelf of all of these VHSs, like maybe 100 More, right? I don't remember how much you could fit onto a VHS anymore.
Right.
But I think one day, maybe in like 1999, I think I was 11, we all just sat down and, you know, we're like, let's watch from the beginning. So
That's
yeah,
incredible.
lots of good memories. Not a specific memory, but lots of good memories.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, I think I was more cognizant of Star Trek like when Voyager came out. And I remember, I'm pretty sure we recorded on VHS like a bunch of Voyager episodes at my cousin's house as well. You know, you got to watch them. They were coming out. Got to stay up to date.
Absolutely. So thinking about the 7 seasons of Next Generation, what would you say is your favorite season?
Okay, so I don't think I have a favorite season. I hate to do a cop out like that, but I think I just really dislike season 1.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. I'm sure you're not alone.
Well, I remember watching a documentary about Next Gen and sort of, Gene Roddenberry saying like characters are beyond conflict. Like they would not have conflict with one another. And sort of the cast and crew being like, how are we supposed to act this? How are we supposed to write this? Conflict only external, no internal conflict. And so, I think the show really transformed as the seasons went on and became a lot more meaty. There's more depth, more character development. And so after the first few seasons, I think that it really grew into a positive place.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. So there's not a season that sort of peaks for you, like, oh, that's so. For example, I know many folks will, when you're having a bad day or having a good day, and you just need a dose of Trek, like pick a season, put it on, and go. Is that something you do or not? Actually, and full disclosure, I do not do that, but I know that exists. Is that something you do?
I have a pretty clear memory of like grad school and feeling just like completely overwhelmed and being like, I need a moment of peace. And honestly, I just started at the beginning. So even though I said I don't love season 1, I still love watching season 1 and love watching all of them. So it's less like, going to one specific place, but maybe starting off where I left off, if that makes sense.
Sure, yeah, that makes sense. Do you have a favorite? Oh, so you go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, like, I had to make a list of my favorite episodes, and that is at the top of the list. So I do love season 5. Darmok is such an amazing episode. It's like heartbreaking and it pushes, your thinking around language and communication, which is just like always an issue, right? That's always something that is going to be a problem when we have folks from different backgrounds and upbringings trying to connect with each other. Like it's such a beautiful episode. I have also listed a few more episodes, but that one was at the top. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, what else made your list? Is this like a top 5, top 10? Like,
I should have done like a round number like that, but I have 6.
no worries, no worries. Go for it.
So top was Darmok and then Lower Decks, which I really love that episode as well because it is like equally heartbreaking as it is eye-opening about just life on a starship. I don't think this is people's favorite, but as a kid, I just absolutely loved Rascals. It was so fun. And then I think this is a lot of people's favorites, but Measure of a Man is a huge favorite of mine. They re-released Measure of a Man, I think, into theaters for like a short time. And my brother and I got to go watch it. Like we also got to watch what's the episode with the crystalline entity? It's like the second episode.
Isn't that Iborg?
Maybe. Anyway, they re-released them into theaters and got to see like on the big screen, which was like so cool. And then of course, Data's Day, so funny, so good. And then The Offspring, which again, I don't know, maybe there's this theme, equally heartbreaking as an eye-opening. I can't avoid it.
I appreciate the sort of spread of of episodes you've chosen. All right, who is your favorite character?
Okay. I am so basic, and my favorite character is Data. You can make fun of me, that is fine.
No, Data's wonderful.
Well, I think he's a lot of people's favorite character. But when Brent Spiner was in like Independence Day and introducing Dorothy Dandridge, I was so excited. Like, OMG, it's Data. And also always being really like super impressed by Brent Spiner's range. Like
Mhm.
seeing Next Gen, seeing all his episodes, and then seeing him in something else, and it's like it doesn't compute. You're like, whoa, you are actually not an android. You are an actor, human being, and it always blew me away. And also, like all of Data's fish out of water moments were so funny to me as a kid, which is like, when I really cemented my love for this character and this series. Like learning to sneeze, right? It just is, it's endearing and hilarious. When he, doesn't know how to, like, he doesn't stop talking. He just keeps going. He makes it awkward. We've all been there. And I think, that has all really endured, like I still think it's funny. A lot of people still think it's funny. I think he's a character everyone like really enjoys. I don't know, it was just funny and it caught my eye as a kid and it stuck with me in my heart. But all of his storylines really push us to grapple with our own humanity. Like I said, Measure of a Man is definitely one of my favorite episodes. And then something else that comes to mind, Picard going back for him in First Contact, like
Mhm.
Data is an android, and yet this person is his friend, his family, right? Data being able to discover his own humanity as his character arc, like always made me very emotional. And then at the end of the day, he's a cat lover, and I am also a cat lover. I have 3 cats, and one of them is named Lieutenant Commander Data, and that is the correct name for her. So, yeah.
Fantastic.
Didn't he make an album?
He did.
Yeah,
He
Old
did.
Yellow Eyes or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Like a riff off of Frank Sinatra's album.
Exactly. Yeah. So yay Data and yay Brent Spiner.
Yeah, he's I am glad. I'm always glad like that he's come back for movies and Picard and stuff like that. And it's just like it doesn't work. Like he does not look like an android anymore. It's like very much suspension of disbelief is but it doesn't matter because I love it and I will always say yes.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So, switching gears a little bit, thinking about the many wonderful ships in Star Trek: The Next Generation. Specifically, we're gonna look at the Enterprise. What is your favorite section of the ship?
Steven, I have no idea. I love Star Trek to my core and absolutely am not into the tech.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I love a future where there is positivity and like we have grown as a culture and as a human race. And like the ships are cool and I love all the things that they can do and the med bays and stuff like that, but I do not have a favorite ship section. The replicator room, love that. The barber shop, also great. These sort of lesser known areas of the ship potentially. 10 forward.
I didn't put much thought into 10 forward, but you know what? I think 10 forward once Guinan's there.
Yeah, for sure.
Because 10 forward as a room is like, it's cool, it's neat. Deck 10, forward of the ship. But I think having Guinan there would tip it over for me.
Yeah, why else go?
I knew I liked you. All right. Well, do you have a favorite TNG uniform?
I feel like once, was it season 3 or 4, they like leveled up?
3, yeah.
3, yeah. Like every permutation after that, I think has been pretty decent. Like the whole jump bodysuit, I cannot get behind. The like skin tight, not a fan. Like even in Enterprise, you know, like they have like the it's way more what's the word? Like usable, right?
It's has utility.
Utility. It's way more has way more utility. But yeah, like seasons 1 and 2, it's a very cringy uniform. So season 3, I'm like, yes, this looks like something I could actually wear.
I have to say that a runner-up or maybe an honorable mention would be the scant. And so as cringeworthy as the season 1 and season 2 jumpsuits were, they had men wearing scants because wearing a scant wasn't based on gender but based on rank. And I thought that was cool. Like 1987, they've got men in quote unquote skirts running around the ship. You know, the gender roles that we often see in clothing today, or are put onto clothing today, didn't exist. You know, in that uniform. I thought that was just the best. And when I go to conventions and I see men wearing scants, I'm like, yes, yes.
I concur. That is very, very cool. So question. The uniform that Pulaski wears, is that a scant with pants?
I believe so. You know, I don't know this for certain, but I've also looked at that and wondered, like, wait a minute. I believe that's what it is. I think I don't know what it's supposed to officially be, but looking at the costumes, I believe that's exactly what it is: a scant with pants.
Yeah, which I love also. I think I would definitely wear that. It seems more comfortable than the like body suit that
Yeah.
everyone's wearing. But yeah, making clothes gender neutral, gender inclusive, like that is a hill that I will die on. I think that is the best ever. And I think, you know, gender as a conversation is so important and people expressing themselves how they want to, I can definitely get behind, but it definitely shifts your thinking, right? When you're however old, seeing on TV people breaking those gender stereotypes, breaking gender expectations. And it just is, it can really shift everything that you've thought before, right? And it's kind of cool.
Yeah. Yeah. As an adult fan of Star Trek, when I speak to colleagues who ask, but why? That's sort of my explanation, you know, kind of coming off of that a bit, but uh, you know, the fact that we figure it out. There's no poverty, there's no famine, there's no war within our own culture. People are free to be who they are without judgment, without design. You know, the sort of milestones in Star Trek that looking back at the original series, the first interracial kiss on television, Star Trek. You know, back now we don't think about it, but in the 60s that was a big deal. In fact, you know, and you probably know this, the only way they got about past the censors was they had to be, you know, high off these psychedelic plants. That's why it was okay. You know, they were forced to do it because they were under the influence of this, right? Like, you know, the fact, like the bridge crew, this is, you know, late 60s, you've got a Russian man, a Japanese man, a black woman as a bridge up. So it's these things that just really drew me to Star Trek. The ability to think outside of these norms that are placed upon us by society and see what the future could be like. It's just, yeah, oh, love it.
Well, isn't it what is it, The Outcast? Is that the episode where Riker like falls in love with a genderless person, like this race of genderless people, right? And
Right.
falls in love with someone. And I'm pretty sure this might be totally made up, but I swear I've heard before that Jonathan Frakes was like, yeah, cast a man in this role, right? Someone who is assigned male at birth, like cast that person in this role.
Right.
And like they were like, no, 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 no. We will cast someone who, you know, identifies as a woman to play this genderless person or whatever. And but I just love that Jonathan Frakes was like up for it. He was like, no,
Yeah,
I'm up for this. Like this is amazing. You know, like falling in love with someone regardless of their gender. So
it's just incredible. I am going to throw a curveball at you. I didn't ask you about this before. So you mentioned the technology wasn't really a big thing for you, that you love Star Trek, but the technology wasn't sort of the thing that drew you in. What is something about this future that wows you, that makes you go, oh wow, that's really cool?
So many things.
Okay.
I think like the altruism, right? The dedicating your life to something bigger than you. And all of it sort of centering on making yourself better and making your community better. Is that what you're asking? Or are you asking something more tangible?
More tangible, just in terms of the future. Like what is it that exists in this? So the ships, the section of the ship is something like, it really is technology based.
Okay.
So what's something else about this future time that if the ship itself doesn't, the technology isn't for you, what is, or is there something else that you're like, wow, that's pretty cool?
Okay. Also, so many things. Universal translator. Yes, please.
Oh, yes.
Transporter, yes, please. I hate flying. I have a flying phobia. I think honestly though, I would end up like Bones or Pulaski and be like, just put me in a shuttle because I don't trust this transporter thingy. But getting somewhere in an instant would be phenomenal. Yeah, I mean, I love science fiction, even if I don't know the science. I love a future where things are easier and better for everyone. And so all of those things bring us closer, right? They
Yeah.
help. And when you have something like a replicator and you're not worried about having food or water or your basic needs met, then you can think about other things and grow your brain and grow your friendships and, your community and things like that. So it's all things that I just want to have. I want all of those things.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing those thoughts.
So this episode is called The Outcast. It's from season 5 and it's episode 17. The Enterprise crew has been asked to assist the Janai with finding a shuttlecraft that has mysteriously disappeared. The Janai are described as an androgynous race with no gender. Riker and Soren, someone from the Janai, right, are tasked with leading the away team, the mission to find the lost shuttle in what they come to determine as null space. So the shuttle has been lost in null space. Working together, Riker and Soren working together, find that despite their different cultural norms and expectations around gender, that they are attracted to each other. Soren comes out to Riker as female, even though she's a part of this genderless race, which is it's a very dangerous identity to hold on her world that views gender as very primitive. So obviously they save the day, the crew is found, yada yada, found the shuttlecraft. But somehow Hait, who is Soren's superior mentor, discovers her identity and brings her before judgment that she will get psychotectic treatment to make her quote unquote normal. To which Riker protests, she is normal, which is a great line. It's a great line. Because Riker has fallen in love with Soren and even risks his Starfleet career, along with Worf randomly, to save Soren from the treatment. But he arrives too late and they have already been altered and therefore no longer have any feelings for Riker.
So Cortney, why this episode?
So I mentioned this already. I'm in this community. I identify as queer. And I also run an LGBT resource center. So I'm in the business of LGBTQ plus student services on a college campus. And I will absolutely acknowledge that this episode does not get everything right, in terms of the experiences of the queer community. But it beautifully talks about the similarities between straight folks, gay folks, that we're not that different, that we deserve to exist without punishment, or being called deviants or getting sent to conversion therapy which conversion therapy is still legal in 19 states in the United States. And 30 years ago, I'm sure that it was far more accepted than it is now. And again, this episode does not get everything right, but I love how Star Trek makes us think about our own experiences. You know, at one point, Beverly says something like, "It's just who I am," in regards to being a woman. And it's so poignant, right? So many people don't have to think about their gender. They don't have to think about their sex or sexuality. And this episode pushes people to just stop and think, what is gender? How can there be a planet without gender? You know, and the crew is sort of having this existential crisis, but in like a totally calm, thoughtful way, except for Worf, right? We'll talk about that.
Because Klingon.
Yes, you know, but what a great episode. It feels ahead of its time. This was aired in 1992, and Riker's dialogue around pronouns and sort of the writers, quote unquote, "we have a neutral pronoun that doesn't translate to your language," is such a dominant narrative right now, 32 years later. Just skipping right over singular they to it. It's something that we do now. So those are just some of my thoughts.
When we chatted about recording around this episode, I was really excited because in the past I've been interested in Star Trek as an adult, as a higher education professional, in many ways because of its delving into social issues, identity differences, sort of how we exist and how we portray ourselves in our lives. In this future setting, right? And I've often thought about, you know, how Star Trek has been ahead of its time since day one in terms of identities, in terms of expressions, in terms of how folks interact with one another. And as an adult, like queer person, like as a gay man, I was really excited to be able to chat about this episode with you. So yeah, really excited to chat. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So first, I agree wholeheartedly with everything you just said. I'm very excited to talk about this with you. I think sometimes like the fanscape of Star Trek is painted as like this very cis, white, masculine space, hetero space, I guess. And that's so different from like Star Trek, like to me, because Star Trek is such a queer, thoughtful, progressive show. Doesn't always get everything right, but it's always like pushing, you know what I mean? And so I think that having an episode where we go, you know, this is for the gays, I think that that is really important, because we're a huge part of the fan base, and you know, we need to delve more deeply into these narratives and push our thought processes around identity, you know.
Absolutely. You know, I think it's interesting that with all the things that Gene Roddenberry did with the original series and The Next Generation, one of the things that I always found interesting was that sexuality and gender identity weren't sort of more forefront. So this is about gender identity, and sexuality, right? This is sort of a. We'll get more into that. But what I'm trying to say is the fact that there weren't gay characters in Star Trek, really for all of TOS and arguably TNG. Someone once asked Gene Roddenberry about this, and I'm forgetting now who it was. Forgive me, listeners. I should know this. But they asked him why, like the first interracial kiss on television, you know, having a Japanese man and a Russian man at the helm, and there's all these sort of different things they discuss, and why not gay people? And his response was something to the effect of, I can only get so much in, I can only get so much through, and I had to decide where that line is. And I guess he drew it at the LGBTQ community. I think specifically with LGB folks, this episode, of course, can arguably be discussed as a trans episode. But apparently he was asked about this. Why no gays? And his response was, I've done what I can to move the needle, and that's the line that I'm not going to be able to cross. I think that's interesting.
I think it's interesting and painful, right?
Yeah.
And that's important to honor. what was I going to say? I think, when did he die? What season? He was like still a part of season 1 and 2, right? Of TNG. 1991. So he died before this episode was made. Yeah.
Well, he died before it was aired. I wonder if it was recorded before he died. I swear when I watched it it says executive producer Gene Roddenberry. I wonder if it was recorded before he died. Oh,
he took a major step back, didn't he? Like after season 2.
True.
So like, I just think I will forever be grateful for the work that he's created. And I think we can have complicated feelings about the show that we love and the creators that made it, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But go ahead.
I was gonna say, a side note, I remember at one of the Star Trek conventions in Las Vegas, I think it was 2021, maybe 2022, they were celebrating, well, I guess I can look that up. They were celebrating Gene Roddenberry's 100th birthday. And there was like the main sort of promenade was covered, like there were quotes from him and all this wonderful stuff. And it really was wonderful. There's so many things that he thought about that were, as you mentioned earlier, sort of ahead of their time, and challenging topics, and pushed us. But the man was also, there were some issues, right? Like it wasn't all. It's hard when it can be hard when you memorialize someone to not completely sugarcoat their existence. So there were a lot of wonderful things he did, and then there were a lot of things that were like, maybe that wasn't the best way to go with that. So all that to say, kind of reinforcing your statement, like, right, we can have complicated feelings about this thing we love. We can have complicated feelings about this person or I'll speak for myself, that I admire for what he did, and not everything was wonderful.
Yeah, I think we can agree on that. All right, so the educator in me needs to put a little pause on our episode to talk a little bit about the difference between sex, gender, sexuality, and romantic orientation. And so this is the school of thought that I come from as an educator who runs an LGBT resource center, is that all of these identities are distinct and meaningful to us, and they're often connected, right? But they're not all the same. Which is difficult because our society and culture packages all queer people into one, box, LGBTQ+. So all of those letters span sexualities, gender identities, romantic orientations, not sex so much, but because our society brings all those things together into one acronym and one box, it makes sense that a show 30 years ago also conflated all of those things, even though they can be different, right? And so really quickly, sex can be connected to genitals, chromosomes, external and internal genitalia, right? Like gonads, like all that stuff, right? All of those things, sort of the idea of biological sex, male or female. And then the third option that our society has created is intersex, someone who has indiscriminate genitalia. And then gender is most known as a binary, man, woman. And you'll notice a very distinct difference, right? Sex, that's female, male. Gender, that's man, woman. But gender is expansive, right? It is not just a binary, it is a spectrum. I personally identify as non-binary, so opposite of the binary. And then romantic orientation and sexuality are oftentimes the same. So you have sexual feelings for someone of a similar opposite gender or same gender, whatever. And then romantic orientation, that's romantic feelings that you have for a particular gender. And so this episode did not do a good job of reinforcing those distinct identities. It conflated all of those identities, actually, pretty much, which I think sort of inadvertently, this episode was meant to be about the LGB, lesbian, gay, bisexual, right? It was meant to be specifically, I think, about a gay experience. But because they conflated all of those things, there was some layers of supporting trans rights as well, that I would say, which was, not the message they were going for. They were focusing on sexuality, but they spent a fair amount of the episode talking about gender. They don't actually like deconstruct gender in the episode, but this person who we don't know their genitalia, right? Because that's how we decide people's gender in our society, right? We see a sex assigned at birth that tells us their gender, but that is not true for everyone. And so sort of just saying like, hey, here's this person. We didn't really talk about this alien race's genitalia, and yet this person has said, I am female or a woman. And everyone was like, yep, great. That sounds right. So that was awesome.
Fantastic. So thanks for taking some time to kind of talk us through that. It can be helpful to have a frame of reference as we're discussing a topic that not everyone is able to kind of conceptualize well and or discuss in a way that's be comfortable or from a place of knowledge. So I said that really poorly. No.
No, I think it was great, right? That's exactly what I was trying to do. We're going to talk about some complicated plot points that depend on us knowing the difference between those four things.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, let's dive into the plot.
So in connection to my little lecturette about the difference between those parts of our identities, Soren, right, asks Riker and Crusher, what does it mean to be a man or a woman, right? And I'm going to say she, her for Soren because she identified herself, right, as, she said female, but I think the story was trying to say woman, and so we're gonna say, I'm using she, her pronouns for Soren. We could use they, them pronouns as well, but that's how she like identified herself, and that's how Riker referred to her as, which I think that's what she wanted. Anyway, so Soren asks Riker and Crusher, what does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a woman? And she doesn't like emulate any of the things that either of them say, right? Like Beverly says, or, she notices that Beverly has like makeup and her nails painted and stuff like that. But she doesn't like go and do any of those things, even though she identifies as female or whatever. She says woman. And I think this is great because, sex and gender don't have an ascribed attribute, right? There are no rules like of what it means to be a woman or what it means to be a man, except sort of, the ones that have been socially and culturally constructed for us, but those aren't like inherently true, right? Those are just things that society says are true. And so Soren isn't like, oh, let me go get my hair done and grow it out and all this stuff, right? Which this is where we're conflating gender and sexuality for Soren as a character. So it's sort of done in this confusing way, where Soren knows she's female because she had like, so this is the weird logic, right? She knows she's female because she has feelings for Riker. And then I'm asking myself, is she asking herself, what are women? People who think Riker is hot? LOL. Like, I just like, the show did this weird turn, making these like connections between femininity, gender, and sexuality, if that makes sense.
Can I make a side comment or observation based on where we're at right now?
Yes.
So this is a question I have for myself, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. I wonder, A, is this happening because like the conversations at the time weren't informed enough to be able to discuss this level of nuance? Or B, were we too young at the time to be aware of whether or not the conversation at the time was informed enough to have that level of nuance?
Well, so
does that make sense?
Maybe can you say the comparison?
Sure. So the first thing I'm thinking is the level of nuance that you're discussing and we discussed now today about these identities. I wonder if that much differentiation and nuance, at least in the terminology, existed in 1992, or and this doesn't have to be an either or, but this is how I'm thinking about it right now. Or like I was 10 when this episode came out. I wouldn't have been aware of that kind of conversation. Like, was it just because like we were young and not aware of that kind of conversation and that terminology, or was the narrative or discussion around these identities just not as informed 32 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a historian, but I can take my guesses. So people still do this, right? 30 years in the future. The idea that we are conflating gender and sexuality, this idea that because Soren is a woman or female, she has feelings for Riker, and that makes sense to people. And that conversation was just about sexuality, and the implications around gender were not even considered, right? That those things just made sense. But you know, in the 90s, you know, Susan Stryker was writing her book about being transgender, and the research that she did, you know, that's when it was like in its birth. But trans history goes back hundreds of years.
Right.
And so that conversation was happening. And I would say it's maybe happening more now in the mainstream. But yeah, in 1992, Star Trek thought they were having this conversation about sexuality, but they were accidentally also talking about gender identity. I think it was an accident. I maybe it wasn't, maybe I'm misinformed, and you know, apologies to listeners, but it just happened because the people who were writing it were like, this makes sense. Like, this makes sense that this person would be having a gender crisis and a sexuality crisis, because as a society, those things are the same, but they're not. They're not really the same.
I follow. Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Okay. But I did think it was funny that it was like the writers were like, women are people who think Riker is hot, and that is a sexuality.
I did appreciate that Riker went to talk to Deanna Troi to say, hey, I might have feelings for someone, and I recognize that might impact you. So I wanted to like come to you and talk to you about that. That showed a level of sensitivity, compassion, and awareness that I think we rarely see with Commander Riker. And I really appreciated that. And you know, Deanna's response of, we'll always be connected. You know, I appreciate you saying that, but I'm happy for you. You know, it was this moment of vulnerability and sensitivity that Riker showed that I just, looking at Riker as a whole, it seems sort of out of character. And I appreciate that the writers did that in this episode.
What intense emotional maturity. Wow. Totally unexpected, I would say.
Juxtaposed with the Riker maneuver, right?
Right. And I thought also, just like, you know, I think Deanna gets some like bad plot lines and some good ones, but her one like liner in that scene when Riker says, but our relationship will stay the same. And she says, of course it won't. Like, there's no way. Relationships are always changing, and our relationship could even get better. I was like, wow, like that is some counseling we all need. Thank you. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
It was a great moment, which I wonder if like Riker's own, like one thing I didn't take a note on, but I think we should talk about is like Riker's queerness, right, in this episode.
Okay.
I think if Riker were in like, if Riker were written now, he would be pan, like 100%, just like love for all and many, right? But there's this moment where he's like, oh, I thought you were female. So does that like satisfy his straightness, or the fact that she is from a genderless race, and like does that make him queer? Like, this is the question that's coming to mind.
That's really fascinating. I absolutely agree that if Riker were written today as a new character, he would be Pan. Absolutely, because Riker loves love. Riker loves to be in love. Riker loves to make love. Like Riker loves love. I think that's an interesting thought of who would Riker be if he was written today? Looking at shows like Discovery, where we have trans and non-binary main characters, where we have a loving, healthy, like overt queer relationship in main cast members. I wonder what that would look like today.
Well, and I just want to say, Riker is queer if he says he is queer, right? Like,
Sure.
it's not for us to decide that because he's in a relationship with, someone from a genderless race that he is queer. So I definitely want to like stop that narrative, right? It's his decision, his identity, his life. But I do think it's a question to ask because of the conversation he has with Soren, where he says, I thought you might be female. And she's like, oh, I'm so glad that you thought that about me. Which I think it just takes away a little bit of the overall message, right? That like, I don't know the gender of all the people who were cast in these roles, but I think casting mostly women to play a genderless society is like a little bit strange, right? Like it actually makes the androgyny, like it's like saying androgyny looks a certain way,
Sure.
right? That androgyny can't be masculine or what have you. Although those like autumnal jumpsuits were beautiful, I think.
They were. The clothing was very chic. Spoiler alert, there's a trivia point about the casting of the
Janai.
Thank you. I kept wanting to say Elgin. That's not right. There is a trivia point about the Janai in terms of casting. We'll chat about in a little bit. In terms of this episode, I mean, this is clearly a Riker episode, right? He is the main cast member we spend time with other folks sprinkled in throughout. Worf was odd, I thought, in this episode. Oh, this card game it's a woman's game because there's too many wild cards, and his thoughts on this, I am Worf, and it's something that has always intrigued me about Worf and how they write him throughout Star Trek. I think by the end of his arc, in terms of like all the series, right? Picard, I'm thinking of Picard right now. We do see a lot of growth in the character, but throughout TNG and Deep Space Nine, there is growth, but it seems so much like, given the fact that Worf is in more episodes, movies than any other character, if we hadn't gotten Picard, he would have had, the most screen time and maybe the least growth. So it's interesting there. And then his, but I'm going to go help you, Riker.
Right. And this was like the perfect moment, right? They missed it. And it's so sad, particularly as like a viewer, right? Who could be on the same journey as Worf. Okay. So you're playing the card game. Deanna says, these cards are wild, 3 different cards, right? And Worf, yeah, like you said, this is a woman's game because it's weak.
Right.
Like, are you kidding me? Like, and Beverly, who's like, oh, I just said one moment ago that to Soren that women and men were equals. And I guess, you're proving me wrong, right? Hundreds of years in the future from now, which is so sad.
I feel like that was written in for like our current audience, right? Present day audiences to like, hey, we're gonna call that out.
Totally. And then, right, for this turn of events where Riker risks his career to save this person he loves, and Worf coming along as a warrior, helping a friend, and not as someone who has learned something and wants to stand up for what is right. Like it was so easy, like like so easy that could have been such a great moment for to be the journey of the viewer, right?
Right.
And he could have said something about, something like kind of cliche now, right? Love is love. Like, you love this person, doesn't matter what their gender is or whatever, people are putting on t-shirts nowadays, but like something,
Absolutely. I also found it interesting when Riker goes into Picard, like, this is my fault. Like, Soren's in trouble because of me. Da 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 da. What are we gonna do? And like, this is season 5. Like, we know we can't do anything. We know the Prime Directive is a thing. This is not something we can, like they're not going to do anything about this in a direct way. And I found it interesting that Picard was so, maybe interesting is not the right word. I found it the way that Picard handled it so gently. Well, here are the facts. Prime Directive, we can't do anything. There's a line. If you cross it, I can't protect you. If I appreciated that, there we go. That's the word. I appreciated that Picard, as much as he's a commanding officer and has a duty to perform, I feel spoke to Riker as a friend in that moment. I recognize where you're coming from. Here are my boundaries. I'm making them clear for you. I support you, and here's the extent of what I'm able to do. And Riker's little pout of "Am I dismissed?" or "May I go now?" or whatever, however he said it, made sense, right? He's upset. This is television, right? They need to. We're not hearing the inner monologue, but I appreciated. I think that does show growth for Picard in terms of, like, earlier on, it was this is this, that is that, rigid, Prime Directive, but he was supporting his friends in the capacity as his superior officer. I think. What are your thoughts?
Okay, so this person is going to go under psychological trauma, right? And their brain is going to be altered permanently. And I just feel like under different circumstances, Picard has stepped in.
True.
Like, okay, so I think Pen Pal is not a great one-to-one comparison because, like, the whole planet was gonna, like, explode or whatever. But they break the Prime Directive all the time. And also, like, they were helping them. You know what I mean? They were already helping them. Like, I think Picard should have said something like, just have them ask for asylum. We'll take them on. Like, that is such a weird thing that he didn't say. But yeah, I thought it was weird that he was so blasé about it. Like, and people in similar situations, they helped them.
Riker mentioned in the trial hearing, whatever it was, that Soren could ask for asylum, and they said no. I'm curious. Well, I mean, I know why. It's to progress the plot. But, like, Soren could have in that moment, I request asylum, and then Riker could have gone back and said, Picard, Soren requested asylum. This is where it comes, right? So, like, there's the writing to make the episode be what they want it to be, and also, like, but you could have done this, but you could have done that. But I agree, like, the Prime Directive has certainly been bent, doubled over, tied in a knot before, and will be again. And yeah, I think it's that's interesting to see. Like, but then the story wouldn't have, like, the moral of the story, so to speak, wouldn't have been shared in that way had that happened. So, like, I can like, as a lover of the show and wanting this character to be able to be who she is, be upset that it went down the way it did, but also as like a observer of the series, it makes sense why they didn't make that call. But you're absolutely right. Like, Picard has totally scrapped the Prime Directive in, like, so many scenarios. Why not this one?
It's weird. Like, I think there's, like, a few drops of, like, homophobia in there, which, don't love that. But, like, for the plot, right? I hear it. I hear you. I understand. And to be fair, conversion therapy still happens right now,
Right.
right at this very moment. And so, if they're trying to, like, make some parallel or whatever, that's great. I think they did it at the expense of his integrity.
I love that Star Trek provokes such thoughtful discussions about who we are as humans and how we function in society and the choices we make. This is why I love Star Trek. This is why I love Star Trek.
Agreed.
Should we get into some trivia?
Yeah.
Okay.
The Outcast is one of 3 TNG episodes where LeVar Burton has a beard, the others being A Fistful of Datas in 1992 and The Quality of Life in 1992. Burton actually preferred facial hair, but the producers did not, which is why his beards never lasted very long.
2 lines of dialogue were cut from the final edit. Noor explaining to Riker that the Janai are, by all accounts, an enlightened race, and Riker asking, then how is it that Soren has no choice about her sexual orientation?
Which, just again, caveat, sexual orientation and gender are different.
Right.
But exactly to my point, this episode did that a ton. We learn in this episode that the Federation was founded in 2161.
Rick Berman tried not to let perceptions of what the public would find acceptable, quote, influence us too much, end quote, in the choice of Riker's opposite, adding, quote, having Riker engage in passionate kisses with a male actor might have been too unpalatable for viewers, end quote. Jonathan Frakes, of course, who plays Riker, didn't agree. He criticized the decision to cast women in the roles of the Janai because he felt a love affair shared between 2 men would have made the statement of the episode much stronger.
This is one of the few Trek episodes that touches upon the subject of LGBTQ plus identities, but only in a very oblique manner. Producer Rick Berman commented, "We thought we had made a very positive statement about sexual prejudice in a distinctive Star Trek way, but we still got letters from those who thought it was just our way of, quote, washing our hands, end quote, of the homosexual situation." That ends his statement. The Star Trek producers are often accused of having cold feet when it comes to addressing LGBTQ plus issues, and Berman has been accused by lead actors of various Trek series of routinely vetoing scripts which deal openly with the subject.
Magellan was the first armed shuttlecraft to appear in The Next Generation.
The poker game in this episode takes place in Data's quarters. 2 items from past adventures are visible in the background: the Sherlock Holmes costume from Elementary Dear Data, 1988, and the glass sculpture Data received from Jenna de Sora in Theory, 1991.
The name of the alien species, the Janai, capital J apostrophe capital N AII, is identical in pronunciation to the Janai, capital GENII, in Stargate Atlantis 2004, where Colm Meaney, of course Chief O'Brien, has a recurring role as the Janai chief. So, final thoughts, thinking about the Outcast, early 90s, conflation of identities, and also an attempt to address a topic that they really haven't addressed much prior to this. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the feedback that Rick Berman got about Star Trek not really focusing on LGBTQ plus stories is fair. And I still think that this episode pushes us to think about things that we may have never thought of before, which is the beauty of Star Trek, right? Building empathy in ways we didn't know we needed to build it. When I talk to people about LGBTQ plus issues, and I'm, for example, talk to straight people and I say, "You have a sexuality," and they go, "What? No, I'm straight." And I was like, "Yes." That is,
ding, ding, ding.
Or talk to cisgender people, and say, "You have a pronoun," and they go, "No, I just use, she, her, they, that, or she, her, he, him." And it's like, right, exactly. You have pronouns and you want them to be honored, right? And this episode, again, it asks us, what if we didn't have gender? How would that make us feel? How are we connected to our own gender? And how is that a big part of our identity? And it makes us think about our connection to ourselves. And if our gender is important to us, right? Particularly for cisgender people, if their gender is important to them, then can they use that empathy to understand why gender is important to trans, gender nonconforming, non-binary, and gender expansive people, right? I would love for Star Trek to do another episode where it's like, this is the message, but in sort of the clunky way they went about this, I think there are still positive moments to be taken and learning to be had.
I totally agree with you. The back of my mind still says, and this was over 30 years ago, right? Like, you know, for its time, it was probably pretty groundbreaking. And I think sometimes it can be difficult. I know when I watch TOS, there are episodes where I'm like, that's... But in the 60s, it was avant-garde. You know, it was so sharp in how it pushed on commonly held beliefs and such. So here we are, you know, so that would have been, you know, 20 years, 25 years after TOS when TNG was coming on, and now here we are 30 years later having similar thoughts. And I mean, I'm actually, you know, taking this through to its natural conclusion. What are folks going to think in 30 years of Discovery? Oh, they should have done more with this, that. Oh, they didn't even touch on that, you know, whatever that may be. I'm actually kind of excited about that, you know, and yeah.
No, that's great. I agree. The space between loving what it was and pushing it to be better. So that's where I am.
Fantastic. Cortney, this was really, really wonderful. I appreciate taking the time to talk with someone who has this knowledge, as an educator, as a human, to take apart an episode that really pushes the boundaries for its time, and we can lovingly kind of dissect it now, and you know, think about where Trek is going, and be grateful for that. So thank you so much for taking time to be here today and chat through this.
Yeah, and if I can give a little caveat and say I'm speaking from my own experience, speaking from my own educational background, and want to honor that I have not tried to summarize other people's experiences or identities, and, you know, I'm open to feedback and criticism for any of the things that I have said today. We're all experts in our own experience, and I never want to try and speak for other people.
Thank you, Cortney.
Incoming transmission.
What shows are on BQN, you ask? Well, here's a rundown of some podcasts you might be interested in. All Good Things, a Star Trek Universe podcast covering all of Trek, hosted by Amy, Christos, Kelvin, and Kristen. Whether you've got Xbox or Nintendo, check out Bargain Bin Gamer, a YouTube show hosted by Davey and Mitch, self-proclaimed gamers who specializes in reviewing and showcasing affordable video games. Grab your popcorn as you listen to Cinema Z, a film discussion and review podcast showcasing films you probably missed but should definitely check out. Hosted by Mark and Matt. Don your apron for The Food Replicator, where Matthew eats and drinks his way through Star Trek Cocktail and 3 cookbooks. Beam Aboard Galaxy Class, a Star Trek Next Generation podcast covering all of TNG, hosted by Steven. In order to not repeat it, listen to History with the Szilagys, a snippet of historical events from around the world, hosted by Chrissy and Jason. For the newest Trek coverage, check out Infinite Diversity, hosted by Chrissy and Thad. Curl up with a good book and delve into beta canon with Peter, host of the Trek Book Club on Twitter and Bluesky, and his companion Trek Book Club podcast. Test your Trek knowledge with Treksperts Quiz, a Star Trek quiz show hosted and written by Davey and MC. If you're a member of Starfleet Federation or Planetary Union, go check out Union Federation, covering current Star Trek and the Orville, which we all know is really a Trek show, hosted by Kyle, Kevin, Amy, and Haley. Head over to YouTube and watch The View Screen live on Sundays, your Trek-inspired talk show hosted by Calvin and Amy, with new 8-week seasons in the spring and fall. Spill the tea with Christos while he discusses current Trek news and events and explores the world of fandom, via guest interviews, all with an LGBTQIA+ perspective on What's the T-Bev. And for our patron members, we have the Hive Mind with script readings and roundtable discussion. It's Green, a cornucopia of topics, and Amy's Math Moments, a quick look at math moments in Star Trek. You can keep up with all of these shows by following the network at BQN Podcasts on Instagram and Bluesky. We know you have a choice of podcasts to choose from, and we thank you for listening to BQN. Assimilate the audio.
We would love to hear what you thought of today's episode and hope you'll join us on our Facebook group, the BQN Collective, BQN Podcasts on Bluesky, or on our Discord server to continue our discussion there. Links can be found in the show notes.
Priority 1 message from Starfleet coming in on secured channel.
Here on BQN Podcasts, you will never hear a commercial on one of our shows. And if you'd like to help us keep all of our shows coming to you each week commercial-free, you can become a patron of the network on Patreon. For just $1 a month, you can join our Let's Fly reaction show, script readings, and other perks. Visit patreon.com/BQN to get all the details and watch your messages.
If becoming a patron isn't your thing, you can still support the show by sharing our posts on social media, talking about it with your friends, or hitting the subscribe button on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, and leave us a star rating and a written review. That helps others to find the show.
At this time, we would like to thank our very own associate producers, Jim McMahon and Davey Willett, and a special thanks to Mark White for our show artwork. We are so grateful for your support. And to all of our listeners, we send out a heartfelt thanks.
Thank you for beaming aboard the Galaxy class. And until next time, make now always the most precious time.
You must talk to him. Tell him he is a pretty cat, a good cat.
Engage.
Hailing frequencies closed.